I recently asked friends for topics that they face difficulties in, and I got a response from a student saying they find ledgers, cash books, and petty cash books the most difficult. So today's lecture will be summing up these three topics. I hope after watching this you'll be able to balance your accounts without much trouble. Okay, so what's a ledger? Why do we prepare a ledger? To know that, you must know how the accounting system works. There are four essential steps we follow in our accounting system: recording data, classifying data, summarizing data, and communicating data. Now, when a business transaction occurs, we issue a financial document to record the data, and then to classify the data, we prepare general ledgers, and then we summarize that information into a trial balance, and then communicate the data into financial statements. Today we'll be talking about classifying data, since our primary focus is general ledgers and the cash book. Now, when we classify data, we prepare the general ledgers because a lot of detail is not required, which would be recorded in our financial documents. And general ledger is for the ease of summarizing and preparing financial systems. That's a financial statements. The format of our general ledgers is as shown below. The debits go on the left and the credits on the right. I hope all of your debits and credits are clear because this is a very essential aspect you need to memorize. So this is basically the format that we need to know for the general ledger. The general ledger is in the form of a T account. Now it gets its name because of its shape, which is the letter T. The aspects that you need to keep in mind are the date, detail, and amount. These go on both sides as shown. The date is basically the time of the occurrence of the transaction. As for the detail, here the name the ledger account goes. इसका ये मतलब है कि, for example, a transaction occurs where a customer paid us by cash. ठीक है? अब, assuming this is our customer account, we're going to enter a cash account here. So this will be our cash account. Okay. And then we have the value of a transaction, which is basically जितनी amount हमने receive होगी in difference. Okay, so the cash book is quite simple. You just have to memorize this format, and इसमें anything that leads to cash entering the business, or any amount that would be entered up into the bank, any cash that would be received by the bank, that would be on our debit side. Any cash that goes out of the business would be on the credit side. Now, the amount that's been transferred from the bank should be in the bank column, and the amounts that are or any transaction that has occurred on cash basis, they will be in our cash column. Okay. I listed down some keywords that you may need to know to distinguish between your debits and your credits. Any receipts or any amount received by your debtor, any income received or rent received, basically any cash going into the business would be on the debit side, whereas any payments, they would be on our credit side. Now, one thing we're going to talk about is the balances. Because the cash in hand and the cash at bank are both basic, that's why they have their debit in nature. So any balances brought forward would most likely go in these segments. However, in the case of our bank, it could be so that we end up having a credit balance even. That is because of the occurrence of a bank overdraft. A bank overdraft ये होता है कि आपके बैंक में जो पैसे पड़े हैं आप उससे ज्यादा spending करो. You take money out of the bank that you yourself do not own. वो जो पैसे आपने बैंक से निकाल के इस्तेमाल किए हैं, that's our bank overdraft. So because of that, we could have a credit balance in our bank. Next up, we have our dishonor checks. There are two types of dishonor checks that may occur. First off, if we send a check to our supplier and the check bounces, if our check bounces, it is recorded as our dishonor check in the debit column. And the reason for recording this in our debit column is because we have to cancel out the original transaction. In our books, जब हमने check issue किया है, we recorded as we paid the supplier. But because our check bounced, we technically haven't paid the supplier. हमारे पास ही है अभी पैसे. So we have to cancel out the transaction. That's why dishonored checks would go on the debit when in the case of supplier. However, there could be a case where we receive a check from the customer and that check bounces. That check would be recorded on the credit side. इसकी reason भी same है. We have to cancel out the transaction because when we receive the check, we enter it up in our debit side because we thought we received the payment from our customer. But that amount technically did not get entered up into our bank account because the check bounced. So now we have to cancel out the transaction. So dishonored checks by customers on the credit side. Moving on, we have our petty cash book. Now, the petty cash book, a lot of teachers don't really bother teaching this because it appears in your exam once in a blue moon, so it isn't really considered important. I myself only found out the petty cash book even exists a month before my exam. So, this is a short rundown on what it's about. Okay, so the petty cash book, it's basically petty cash होता है कि आपके छोटे छोटे expenses होते हैं एक business के. Like if you watch any corporate series or any corporate drama, you would know a lot of like the employees or secretaries run small errands where they have to like spend on coffee, clothes, or whatever. Okay, those small payments, those are petty cash. Okay, they are paid out by the business and they're like small insignificant amounts. uh the, Basically your petty cash, it is kept in the petty cash box, which is known as a float. There are two sources of petty cash. One is a small receipt. आपकी basically अगर office में कोई बंदा आया है and they have to use one of your services like your printer. स्कूल में तो छोटा सा printer या photocopier area होता है. If someone who is visiting the business uses one of the small services, they have to pay a very small, insignificant amount, like 10, 20, 30 rupees. You get that is basically your small receipt. And the second source of petty cash is the impress system, which is maintained by the business. The impress system basically, your business it holds a amount of flow, a fixed amount of petty cash is kept in the petty cash box, and that amount is used up by the employees for those small sundry expenses. And at the end of the period, or like at the end of the month, the petty cash is restored to the fixed amount that the business maintains. And इसका format बहुत simple है. If you end up having to draw the petty cash book, this is the format. ठीक है, देख के डरना नहीं है इसको. ठीक है. BN जो है इस part को ignore करो. You don't need to write about this. On the debit side, you're going to have your receipts. And on the credit side, you're going to add up all of your expenses. Now, when you write your expenses, you have to categorize them as ये कौन सी expenses हैं. ठीक है, and at the end of the period, you have to balance it out. ठीक है, and then your balance CD is carried on as your balance CD in the next year. And as I mentioned, the fixed amount is set, which in this case would be 250. So now if we have 85 left over from the month, so we're going to add up the remaining amount to keep the 250 fixed amount in our petty cash. Okay, that's about it for this lecture. I hope this was of help to you guys. And if anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to DM me.